I used to be the singer of a punk metal band called Scotch Tapeworm. We never really made it big, but we had a few popular gigs around the Minnesota area. We even warmed up the stage for a few big names, which I won't name drop here. But I wanted to tell you about why I quit, and why there are no songs from our band online anymore. The short version is that someone stole the music in me. Yeah, that sounds weird. Let me explain. We'd had a streak of good luck, and we were feeling that our newest song could be the way to a record deal if it reached the right people. We managed to fund a music video, and we worked hard on it for about 2 months. We talked to a whole bunch of reaction channels on YouTube and sent out a whole bunch of previews. Overall, it looked positive. We even thought about skipping the middleman and going straight to recording our own studio album. Needless to say, I was living and breathing music during those days. Spent and Deflated was going to be our big one. But it didn't quite work out that way. It all started with an email. One of the reaction channels had a copyright claim. In a matter of hours, we got over 12 similar emails. We challenged each and every one of them, but it didn't matter. The claimer was adamant this was their content. Of course, it was nonsense. Some shell company that we'd never heard of. There we were, the entire band, ready to party and watch the reactions of our music, beers, snacks, and 2 hours of pre-partying. And then we were all stuck answering angry emails. It fucking sucked. After that, we made all our videos private. It was the only way to make sure no one else got paid for the traffic we generated. We tried to get hold of the mods, but nothing happened. We got stuck in automated response after automated response, and we didn't have enough of a Twitter presence to get someone to answer our direct messages. So all our momentum started running out, and Spent and Deflated just sat there with a handful of Spotify listens. Then one night, I got a notification on my phone. One new comment on one of our videos. What the fuck? All our videos were private. And there it was, a single comment on Spent and Deflated. It just said, "So good," and linked to some kind of number. Spam. Of course there was fucking spam. At that point, I was about to give up. I threw my phone across the room, probably waking up my neighbour. The next few days, the band was having trouble. People weren't showing up for rehearsal, and our drummer was even talking about quitting. Much like the song, they were spent and deflated. We tried to work up the energy to find solutions, but it all just felt like the world was against us. We had this fucking banger of a song, but we just couldn't get it out there. It felt so weird getting desperate over this, like the public was doing us a favour hearing our song. Is that what music is nowadays? One night, I had a bit too much to drink, and I ended up spending the night with my phone in my bed. I just laid there, half asleep, waking up from time to time to swipe right on Tinder and swipe a mouthful of vodka while I was at it. I ended up listening to YouTube, not watching, and by some drunken thought, I checked out the comments again. I decided I wanted to mess with whoever posted that, so I checked it out. Turns out, it wasn't just some random phone number. It was some kind of WhatsApp number. I gave it a call. To my surprise, an actual human answered. "Is this from Scotch Tapeworm?" the woman on the other end asked. "Well, yeah," I said. Again, deflated. My anger just ran out of me. "Yeah, I'm the singer," I continued. How did you leave that comment?" "We collect good music from smaller channels," she said. "Would you be interested in a collab?" "Yeah," I said. "Hell yeah!" We worked out the details. I was to come see them at their recording studio the upcoming weekend, on my own. I didn't even question that I'd set up a meeting with someone I never even asked the name of, after having rung a single tone to an unknown number at 2 a.m. on a Thursday. I was drunk. The next day, I was about to cancel the whole thing. I'd made a note in my calendar, and it took me a solid hour to even make out the words I'd misspelled. Still, there it was. Time and place, clear as day. I had an entire day to get my hangover out of my system and just cancel, but I never came around to it. Instead, I figured we had nothing to lose. So yeah, I just went on with my day and got ready for the meeting with these mystery fans. I know, it seems crazy, but I live in an area where crime is something that happens to other people. I met with this woman I talked to on the phone outside a cafe downtown. She seemed perfectly pleasant to talk to, and I didn't get any weird vibes. If anything, she was kind of into me, despite her being a few years older than me. She bought me a latte and we took a walk back to the studio. She introduced herself as Eve, and that her family owned a private studio. She wanted to talk to me, show me around, and if things went well, they could help us with future recordings. It sounded great, and I have to admit, I was getting excited. No longer drunk on vodka, I was getting drunk on attention and future prospects. Her property was just off the highway, but we took a shortcut through the forest to get there. I tried to memorize the path, but I'm not known for my amazing attention span. Soon, we had walked for about 35 minutes. The house just seemed to appear out of nowhere. It was this large 2-story house, along with a big attic and a round window. There were 2 cars on the driveway, a tire swing, and plenty of open space. Hell, on the far side was a gazebo that looked recently built. It was nice, and I'd never heard of that place before. "Welcome," she said, "to 65 Hatchet Lane." She told me her kids were out for the day and that her husband would be back within a few hours. In the meantime, she showed me around. The house was beautiful, but I got the feeling that it was a bit too new, like someone had just moved in. There were no little imperfections that come from someone living in a place for too long. No rough edges, so to speak. It was immaculate and artificially homey. Still, I figured that it was just what their family was like. She took me down to see the studio. That thing was definitely new. There was an isolation booth in one of the corners that was more or less covered in the plastic out of the box. Some of the instruments in the live room looked unused. It all smelled like plastic rather than coffee or cigarettes, so I knew no one had been down here before me. "You'll be our first client," she said. "Our first collaborators." Fair enough, I thought. Still, if you have 3 guitars valued at a total of $36,000, you probably aren't doing this just for fun. She asked me to do a trial in the live room, just to get a feel for the place. I didn't mind, and stepped in. I sang a few notes from Spent and Deflated, and got a thumbs up from the control room. "Sounds great," she said with a smile. "Hold on while I get the others." I should have gotten out, there and then. But I didn't. How could I have known? 20 minutes passed, and I decided to stretch my legs and check out the mix table. The door was locked. I checked, and checked again, but it was locked tight. I was stuck down there with all the expensive equipment. I checked my phone, but there was no reception. We were more than 8 feet underground, after all, and this place didn't seem all that accessible. I started banging on the door and window, but there was nothing. This place was soundproof. 20 minutes turned to an hour, and an hour turned into 2. I'm not a claustrophobic person, but after spending that long locked in any location, anyone would start to feel cramped up. I was screaming, pounding the door, pacing back and forth. I tried not to hyperventilate. I tried throwing a chair through the window, but it didn't even make a dent. Bulletproof. Soundproof. This was a fucking bunker. At some point, I nodded off in the corner. I must have slept for at least 2 hours before I woke up. It was close to midnight when someone started flashing the lights. I opened my eyes. The entire studio was dark, but I could see them in the control room. At least a dozen people, cramped together, their eyes reflecting the red from the mixed table diodes. Some small, some big. I had no sense of how tall they were, or how old. I couldn't even see who was Eve and who wasn't. In the red lights, I saw a grey hand reach forward and grab a microphone. There was a crackle in the live room. Sing! That wasn't Eve. It sounded more like a crow trying to call forth a humanish sound. The grey hand had these long, white nails, like talons. Sing! The eyes, they didn't blink. She was holding down the microphone button, breathing heavily. It felt like she was filling the room with her warm breath, choking me with her unwavering look. I tried to just sing, but it was like having a rock in my chest. I couldn't draw breath. I couldn't think. Fucking sing! I tried to take a breath, but I'd started to sniffle. I was holding back tears, and I hadn't even realised it. I was so fucking scared. I was being kidnapped, and these strangers were making me jump through hoops. I had no idea what to expect anymore. I tried to sing the first lines. 6 minutes to midnight, hunger unsated, I began. Bathing in misery I've created. You're not singing! It was no longer a voice. It was a growl, a caw, some kind of bird-like noise. There were clicking noises coming from the other bystanders in the room. Sing! I tried 4 more times. Over and over I broke down. I cried, I pleaded, I tried, but I was too scared. The room was completely dark, and all I could see were those red eyes. They still didn't blink. A few of them moved in and out of the room. One of them ran up the stairs, but there was never less than a dozen of them. On the 6th try, I finally managed to get the right tone. I tapped into something primal, something angry, like a cornered animal. 6 minutes to midnight, hunger unsated, bathing in misery I've created. Turn your backs, traitors, one at a time. Don't you think we can see that you're spent and deflated? I screamed my voice out. This was the goddamn performance of a lifetime, and all who were there to see were on the other side of that glass, staring me down. The red eyes didn't flinch, but they nodded. Good, the voice said. Good. The door opened. A slight reflection from the eyes towered above me. Whoever stepped in was taller than the door and could barely fit in the room. They just stared down at me, and I could see the outline of their teeth. Clawed hands reached for me. I backed myself into a corner, my voice too torn to scream. Something grabbed my long hair, and step by step, I was dragged out, kicking and screaming. I thought that was it. That was me dying right there, never having been on a proper stage. I was brought up the stairs, out the door, and into the woods. The moonlight showed me the outline of my attacker, this tall and gangly man, roughly twice my height. He had this strange beak-like face, and his eyes almost shone from the moonlight. I tried to get away, but he had this mechanical grip on my hair and head. The more I struggled, the more warmth I could feel from my blood running down my neck. Finally, he let go of me. As I turned around and lay flat on my back, he pushed me down, his hand large enough to cover my entire chest. His long face revealed a teethless mouth, stinking with ammonia. I stopped fighting. He had me. In a swift motion, he covered my entire face with his mouth. I started to fight him off. I was choking, my lungs contracting and trying to close themselves off. I could feel my fingers going numb as my heartbeat rose in my chest. Then, darkness. The next day, I woke up on the side of the highway, covered in booze, with a bad cough. I called the police, barely able to speak a word. The next hour was a flurry of faces, questions and cars. I told them about the house at 65 Hatchet Lane, only to be told there was no such address. I tried to get them to follow the trail we'd walked, but I couldn't remember where it was. One by one, they all assured me that no such place existed, and that if it did, it must have been somewhere completely different from what I was describing. There were a few witnesses that had seen Eve, but no one had ever seen her before. Within a day, it was obvious that we'd hit a dead end. Since then, I haven't been able to sing. My voice crackles and makes me cough, but worst of all, I can't find any tunes. I can't even keep to a rhythm. I've stopped tapping my feet and banging my head, like my body just no longer gets it. It feels like a phantom limb, just out of reach. I can't even fake it, it's just not there. I just want my music back. I never want to see that beak-faced man, but I can't live like this. Please, if someone knows anything, let me know.